from coast to coast and around the world. We're glad that you're listening today. And afternoon in the house is Dr. Grace. Dr. Grace, I'm so glad that you're with us. And listen, folks, Dr. Grace is the culture and political editor of the World Tribune. She's also the host of American Heartland with Dr. Grace and been a correspondent on Freedom Friday for several years. It's always good to have you in the house to tell us what's going on around Washington and along the East Coast. And so one of the first things I want to ask you to comment upon is this the statement that Rudy Giuliani made at a Scott Walker event. It was a dinner where he questioned. In fact, I've got the quote right here. He says, quote, "I do not believe, and I know this is a horrible thing to say, but I do not believe that the president loves America," end quote. And all I can say to that before you comment is, okay, Franklin Graham now gets it. Rudy Giuliani now gets it. Some of the media is beginning to get it. You and I have been saying it for years, and we've been called idiots for saying it, but now people are finally getting it. What else do you have to say about it?
Well, look, I think Rudy Giuliani was 100% right. He has confirmed again in follow-up interviews that he's not backing down from what he said. And he did say, though, that he thinks that the president may not love America, but that he's nonetheless a patriot. I would take it further. I would say this man does not love America and is not a patriot. And I think that that's demonstrable by the facts. If you define, I mean, what is America? What makes America unique and distinct? Let's identify some of the things and see where Obama stands. One of them is a free market economy, capitalism. We are known around the world as having the best economy in the world, and that has been the result of a free market philosophy. Does Barack Obama like that? No. He despises it. He wants to wreck that. He wants to have a European-style socialist state. So, as far as capitalism, he doesn't like it.
Right.
Does he like our Constitution, which is the envy of the world? No. He doesn't like our Constitution. He's willing to trample all over it. He wants to use executive authority without the consent of, in any way that he wants, in an illegal manner. He doesn't care about the system of checks and balances that our founding fathers created, which gives Congress oversight over the government. He and his entire administration constantly stonewall investigations that are justified by Congress, that should be respected and honored.
Thank you.
So he doesn't care about the way that the Constitution has been set up, limiting the powers of the executive, and also giving Congress oversight over the entire government. He hates our Constitution.
Thank you.
What else? What about in terms of national security? America has been known historically as a benevolent superpower. We are known as an exceptional nation. That's not just part of our mythology, but it's around the world. It's generally perceived as such. And what does this president believe? He believes that American power is a source of ill in the world, not a source of good. That's why he has a policy of appeasement and withdrawal. So in foreign affairs, he doesn't want our presence around the world as it has been historically maintained. And then what about our traditions? Does he like Christianity? This country is a Christian nation. It's a majority Christian population. It was founded on Christian principles. It has thrived under Christianity. Does he like Christianity? No. He apologizes for Muslims whenever he can, and every chance he gets, he bashes Christians. Recently at the National Prayer Breakfast, saying, we should get off our high horse because we had the Crusades and Inquisition, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't see the good that Christianity has done, nor how essential it is to our identity. So I'm asking you, Carl, what part of America does he like?
Well, he doesn't like our definition of home, marriage, and family. He hated the Defense of Marriage Act. He didn't like our health care system and has now replaced it with a monstrosity disaster. And on and he doesn't like our border laws. He doesn't like our immigration policies. I mean, he hates the very essentials and foundational fundamentals of what America stands for and what has made us great.
You know what? He doesn't like the rule of law. Remember that the Anglo-American tradition, we take so much pride in the fact that we don't have a lot of laws like other nations. We have few laws, but generally there's a law-abiding population that has a reverence for the rule of law. He doesn't give a damn for the rule of law. And then when we ask the question, well, culturally, what does he believe? This is a country that believes in meritocracy. We think that this nation is known for the fact that you can come from any walk of life and rise to the highest office. Does he trumpet what a great meritocracy we have? No. He keeps saying that there's a 1% that has more money than the rest of us. And he basically talks the language of class warfare, which is not an American language.
Right.
So I don't see anything about America that he loves or even likes.
Well,
and to make matters worse, he told us in 2008 when he was courting us, because when you're a candidate, you're courting the electorate.
Yes.
He was basically telling us to our face, I want you guys to vote for me, but I really don't like you guys. I really want to change you.
Well, and I was going to say, if you looked at his voting record, it was more liberal, more socialist than Teddy Kennedy's at the time, and that was documented in mainstream media sources, number one. Number two, look at the books he wrote, look at the papers that we had access to, look what he said about socialism, about Islam, about his affinity towards that, and then listen to his campaign speech, we are going to fundamentally change America. What did we think he meant by that?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's preposterous to say that this man loves America. He clearly doesn't, and I say that the only problem that Giuliani is, the only mistake he's making is that in a way, although he's been so brave and courageous to say outright what so many of us think, he's making a mistake by backtracking a little bit and saying, well, but he's still a patriot. No, I'm sorry.
No.
This man is not a patriot. If you release 5 Taliban commanders for which our boys have died to capture, and you release them, that poses an imminent national security threat to this country. That is an act of treason. That is an act of betrayal. That is unpatriotic. There's no other word for it. So he doesn't love the country, and he's unpatriotic. And I think that we should be saying this more and more and loud and clear. And I think Giuliani made a great point when he said there are other Democratic presidents with whom we may disagree, but we still think that they ultimately fell within an American tradition of dissent.
Yeah.
This is not this man.
Yeah.
He doesn't fall into a tradition of, well, I kind of want to tweak American foreign policy here and there.
Yeah.
No, he wants to take a wrecking ball to everything that we've done throughout the 20th century, things that define us, that make us who we are.
Yeah, and you know what? I agree with your assessment. I mean, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, I felt like that they really didn't love the same kind of American principles that you and I love, but I understood that more as a political thing, a Democrat-Republican thing, a little bit more. But I don't mind telling you, before Obama even went in office, when he was running and when it became apparent that he was moving up the ladder and giving Hillary Clinton a run for the money, and then the next thing you know, he's overtaken her, that's when I immersed myself in doing some study and reading on this man. I figured, well, looks like he's got a shot. I better find out who he is. And the more I study and dug, and I'm telling you, I was on the air, Dr. Grace, when a caller called and questioned his birthplace and his birth certificate, and I sweetly, the word mocked is not right, I sweetly questioned the guy because I couldn't imagine that this guy could be running for president and not be vetted. I mean, I kind of laughed when he said that. And now here we are 7 years later, and Giuliani scratching his head saying, this man doesn't love America. Well, that's what we told you. Franklin Graham scratching his head and saying, this man loves Islam than he loves America. Well, that's what we told you for 7 years. I mean,
Carl, when you think about it, just to reinforce your point, doesn't he have the view of America that a foreigner would have?
Exactly. That was my point.
Doesn't he talk about America with the same kinds of criticisms as some of our foreign critics do?
Yep.
And all of this is different than other American presidents, even Democrats, say Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter. We may disagree on a few things that they did here and there, or we may think the Clintons are horribly corrupt, and in that way they don't love America because they're violating the civic. They're not exercising civic virtue. But I mean, if you look at many of the speeches that Clinton made, he always tipped his hat to American traditions and spoke as an American criticizing the United States.
Right.
But this man puts the grievances of other nations, he gives the grievances of other nations more credence than the benevolence of our nation. He
Yeah.
talks more like a foreigner than an American.
Thank you. Well said. Exactly. Well said. I've never said it as eloquently as you, but I've been screaming the same thing for several years now. It's amazing. It is, isn't it amazing? Where somebody like myself, and there are others besides me, and you as well, and you're been in the media for a long time, and here we are on the radio and in news publications and on television, and we're saying these things, and for years we're kind of scoffed and mocked and conspiracy theorists. And here we are years later, and now the mainstream media is reporting these mainstream guys are scratching their head and saying the same thing we've been saying. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that now people see that we were not the nuts they were claiming we were. But it's almost like, guys, it's almost a day late and a dollar short.
Well, you know what, Carl? I would say that talk radio has a tremendous influence. And I think that we lead public opinion. And we have been emboldening folks to challenge the superficial explanations of the mainstream media.
Yeah.
And I think folks like Giuliani kind of are coming out, saying what is openly said on talk radio. And I think that this is why talk radio is so important, because it's one of the places where people really say what is being thought. Mm-hmm. And I think this movement of conservative talk radio is incredibly powerful. It stands against the deadening political correctness that wants to really silence our thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think that we lay the groundwork for folks like Giuliani to come out and say what is being said openly on talk radio.
And to back up what you just said, and then we've got to take a break. Can you imagine, Dr. Grace, where we would be right now in America if there was zero conservative talk radio? Let's say they had wiped it out with the fairness doctrine or whatever you want to call it, which is a misnomer, but let's say that there was no conservative talk radio. It was just the mainstream media operating the way they're operating and NPR kind of radio. Can you imagine what these people would be getting away with? Giuliani certainly wouldn't be saying what he's saying. Franklin Graham might not be saying what he's saying.
You are exactly right. And I think it would be a much less intellectually vibrant place if we didn't have conservative talk radio.
It would be dark indeed. Hey, Dr. Grace, I want to ask you about this summit held in Washington, D.C. that Obama did about this violent extremism and why all of the avoidance of the word Islamic terror and Muslim extremist, etc. But before we jump into that conversation, please tell folks where they can find you. Tell folks about your radio program, where it can be heard, the name of it, where you write, how they can find your articles, websites, etc.
Well, thank you so much, Carl. They can read my writing at worldtribune.com, and my radio program is American Heartland with Dr. Grace, and that's on WTSB Radio. WTSB Radio. That's on Saturdays at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, and let me give the folks at WTSB a great big shout out. I know those folks because of you, and do quite a few interviews on WTSB because of you. But those folks are some of the finest people in the world, and I love what they do, and I praise God for them. So, and I'm so glad.
Well, it's a God-fearing, God-loving family that runs that station, and I'm so blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah, I know, and they love you, and your show is heard through internet and YouTube and everywhere else, all over the world and around the United States, and then of course by a huge listening audience on the radio the radio broadcast of that big station. So anyway, so good, and your last name so that people can look you up on
Vuoto, Vuoto,
yeah,
Grace Vuoto. Thanks for reminding me. I don't say my last name enough now that I'm known as
I know.
Grace.
And it's just a little unusual, so it's not one that people...
It's Vuoto, V-U-O-T-O. Thank you, Carl.
Well, it's not Grace Smith or Grace Jones. I mean, it's Grace Vuoto. So we want to make sure that people know when they go to World Tribune to look you up, Dr. Grace Vuoto, V-U-O-T-O, Dr. Grace Vuoto. Okay, good. All right, well, talk to us about this summit in Washington, D.C., and Obama and all the gaffes and guffaws and everything else.
Well, Carl, it's very frustrating. I mean, here you have ISIS beheading people killing lovely folks like Kayla Mueller, the Syrian aid worker, the 26-year-old who recently was killed, and other American hostages. So here you have ISIS committing these acts of shameless barbarism, and all the president can do is convene a summit where he talks. Yeah. And what does he say? He's calling for some kind of a global agenda, and he wants us to properly define what is happening. And you know what that definition is? Yeah. We're supposed to call it violent extremism. First of all, that's the most idiotic two words put together I've ever heard. I mean, isn't violence extreme? That's an oxymoron. If it's violent, it's extreme.
Yeah,
that is just ridiculous.
The only thing more ridiculous, I thought you were going to say he was going to call this workplace violence, but he would never do that with an Islamic terror attack on an institution. He wouldn't call that workplace violence, would he?
No, right? So it's violent extremism, and then you have John Kerry and this woman from the State Department, Mary Harf, who are saying we have to explore ways in which we can get to the long-term, we need a long-term solution to this problem. I think you're hearing my toddler out of control there in the background.
That's okay.
My apologies.
Don't you worry. That happens sometimes. We just appreciate you that you're on the air. Do you need to go take care of that, or are you okay?
No, I've told him to hush, 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 hush. He's out of his cage, guys. He's out of his cage.
Okay. And that happens.
Usually he does a good job being in lockdown. So I was saying that you have this phenomenon of Mary Harf and John Kerry, the Secretary of State, saying we need to find long-term solutions to the ills that are affecting the Muslim world. Yeah. And all I kept thinking is, it's not because these people don't have the adequate jobs that they are attacking and killing Christians and Jews and fellow Muslims. It's because of an ideology.
Exactly.
Because they want to create a worldwide Islamic caliphate. And I've had folks on my show that I've interviewed, people who track this very carefully, and they say that so many of the recruits, they don't come from the poor. They come from highly educated, highly prosperous folks.
And some of them come from America.
It's a myth. It's not the poor that joins ISIS. And their hold has nothing to do with the level of jobs or non-jobs that they have or don't have.
Thank you. And some of them come from America, and some of them come from Europe, and it's not about jobs for them. And also, if it was so simple, and hear me, Dr. Grace, and I know your heart is the same way, if we could end Islamic terrorism by providing jobs, I say, man, open up some McDonald's. Let's give them some jobs. But then I'm saying, if it was that easy, why can't we cure the social ills in America and Canada with more jobs? Why can't we cure the social ills all over the world? Just sling jobs around the place. But that's idiotic. It's idiotic to even suggest that is what is going to stop Islamic extremism. Because as you just said,
it's completely idiotic and it's unrealistic. And you know what? The sad thing is that George Bush realized that, look, in the long run, if you want to transform the Muslim world, you need to create an alternative vision of what a society should look like. And that's why he embarked on this democracy project in Iraq, which, by the way, this administration has just wrecked. And so now they're groping for some kind of larger solution when they wrecked the only game in town.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Listen, we have less than 2 minutes left. Tell us about the Hillary Clinton Foundation and the trouble they're running into with foreign money.
Well, the Clinton Foundation had stopped taking foreign money while she was Secretary of State because obviously it represents a conflict of interest. When she was Secretary of State, Bill Clinton was heading that foundation, and she let it be known that there could be no foreign money coming in anymore because that puts her in a conflict of interest. Well, now she's about to run for office, as far as we can tell, and the Clinton Foundation basically lifted the moratorium on that. And they are now, the Wall Street Journal has broken this story, they are taking money from foreigners and even foreign countries that have supported terrorism. And that puts her in a very difficult situation. Even they're taking money from foreign nations that oppress women.
Right.
So this is a real huge scandal, and you have people on the left saying she really has to make sure that she closes that down because this is, as Ron Fournier has said at the National Journal, stupid of her to be doing this.
Yeah, so what's next? What are they saying about it? How are they responding?
Well, they're now putting pressure on her. If she wants to be a credible candidate, she's going to have to address this because this drudges up. It ties her in as similar to Bill Clinton. It links her to him. In a recent poll, she was perceived as a candidate that represents the future. But as Ron Fournier has pointed out, he said, look, this behavior reminds everybody of the sordid behavior of her husband, who was selling off the the Lincoln bedroom in order to get money from donors. So this presents her as a candidate bringing back all the corruption of the past rather than forging a strong, clear vision of something beautiful for the future.
Right.
It's another huge faux pas, and what baffles me is why you don't have other Democrats stepping into the ring and saying, you know what, I'm going to challenge this woman for the Democratic nomination.
Hey, listen, well said, and we're out of time, Dr. Grace.